Blockchain Chatter, presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in Fintech executive search. Welcome to Blockchain Chatter, the show where blockchain leaders join me for a chat. I'm your host, Dexter Cousins, and today's guest is David Lavecky from Canvas. Canvas is a global blockchain company with a mission to digitise finance. They offer decentralized capital market infrastructure that enables financial institutions and governments to easily expand their reach into the digital economy. With a deep understanding of financial markets and the digital economy, Canvas is committed to driving the digital transformation of banks, financial institutions, and governments in the modern landscape. I chat to David about the recent announcement by the RBA to pilot use cases for a CBDC, or digital Aussie dollar. And as a fintech and payments veteran, David shares why he's so excited by blockchain technology. And as he's such a successful entrepreneur, I asked David to share his tips in launching, scaling, and exiting businesses. But before I chat to David, if you're new to the show, make sure to hit follow and leave a review. It helps other blockchain fans like you discover the show, promotes our awesome guests, and it makes me happy. A trifecta of goodness with just one click. Hi, David. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Dexter. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you on. Timing seems fortuitous, but we've been talking about this since the end of last year when our good friend David Engel introduced us, and he'd just been on the show talking about Starkware. And he said to me when I talked to him about the concept of the show, you got to get Canvas on. These guys are doing some amazing stuff. And I wasn't aware of you. And then I checked it out and I was like, yeah, we've got to get Canvas on the show. So it's fantastic to have you with us. Would you, for the benefit of our audience, be able to tell us a little bit about who Canvas is?
Sure. So Canvas is a global blockchain company on a mission to digitize finance. So we've built a layer 2 network on Ethereum and a range of applications that serve the investment of digital assets with insurances of privacy, high speed, and low cost. And so all of this is designed to suit the needs of financial institutions, governments, and corporates as they move into digital assets and they begin to trade tokenized assets in the digital economy.
Fantastic. So you mentioned there about some of your kind of clients and customers. What was the thinking behind focusing on the institutional and government side? Because it's certainly not what we see a lot of in the Web3 and kind of crypto space.
So it's very much in line with our heritage. So for over 20 years, my brother and I have been in Fintech. This is our second venture in the space. And our last business, we were working with banks all around the world, providing them with on-demand SaaS solutions around FX and payments. And so really, we understand the space of working with financial institutions. It definitely doesn't move as fast as other client types, but we know that that's where actually the volume is, and that's where the next wave of adoption is, and that's where we want to focus on bringing the infrastructure that's needed to onboard those users and volumes that are really where the space is going.
It's kind of it's almost like a sign of maturity of the blockchain and Web3 space, right? To hear you say that, because when I consider the time that I've been in fintech, which is officially almost a decade, but when the word was coined, but prior to that, like yourself, in payments and in financial services. But what's really interesting is that within fintech, I think that certainly what I've recognized, and I think everybody else, is that consumer-led businesses are very, very difficult to scale and to make profitable. And that in crypto that hasn't been the case because of the way in which the kind of mechanics of it have worked. But now that it very much seems to be that, the way forward and where the as you mentioned, the real kind of volume and scale is in the institutional side. What do you think has taken, for it to be 13 years into the technology now for us to finally be at this point where institutions are kind of starting to seriously look at the tech?
I think it takes a long time for a technology to mature and also prove itself. Institutions have to manage risk a lot, and that across a range of different areas and across a range of different facets. And so they're not the first to adopt new technology. They need to mature and be proven. And that's a very slow cycle. And it also takes time for them to integrate and change applications. It's like trying to change out the engines on an A380 while it's mid-flight. And so these things move slowly, but when they do, it's a big uptick in volume and growth because they present a paradigm shift.
And just how big is the problem that you're solving, David?
So when you look at traditional finance across a range of different areas, so if you look at the foreign exchange market, there are trillions of dollars traded daily. And so when you move that from traditional fiat currencies and platforms into digital assets and digital currencies and CBDCs, that's an enormous opportunity in and of itself. If you then look at the natural extension and a counterpart to foreign exchange is remittances. Remittances are hundreds of billions of dollars a year moving all around the world. Then look at payments. Payments as well is trillions of dollars, electronic payments. So all of these areas. And then if you look at the tokenized and securities, digital securities, the amount of volume that's traded on the Australian Stock Exchange or on the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, these are all going to move to tokenized based structures over time. This is trillions of dollars.
Yeah. And I guess, look, it seems like a crazy question, but the problem that you're solving, what are the limitations of Web 2, and why do you see Web 3 as being the kind of solution to the problem?
Sure. So Mark Andreessen has an interesting quote where he says that the original sin of the internet is where they didn't put money on it. And if you look at the way that money moves today, and we've got a lot of experience in this area coming from an electronic payments background, is that information and value or money move separately. And you've traditionally had no trust in counterparties. And so that's why they've had intermediaries such as banks, such as Visa, such as SWIFT that are providing service and moving and sitting in the between the parts of a transfer. And that means that at every step of the way, there has to be reconciliation, there has to be matching up, and there's room for error. And it creates inefficiencies and creates problems as well. SWIFT payments all the time, very regularly get lost or get slowed down, and then to investigate them can take days or weeks. And so and when we look at, say, a blockchain-based structure, I can send you a value, I can send you money instantly, direct, and it settles with finality just instantly. And so this is what's not possible in Web 2, given that you can't really send value directly from one person to another. And so I think this represents all of the blockchain represents a paradigm shift and a dramatic improvement over what we've done in Web 2.
I think it's just interesting as well to kind of talk about SWIFT, because essentially that's just a messaging service. They're not physically moving money. It's just a messaging service to go, hey, Bank A, can you change your ledger to Bank B to show this, reflect this change? What have you kind of seen, with the emerging technologies as to, I guess, one, kind of how scalable it is to, so, we've talked about trillions. I think scalability has always kind of been an issue up until recently, but also, kind of the challenges of, Swift's a really powerful organization that's got a lot to lose. Like the challenge of actually, getting, kind of challenging that, those types of organizations.
Yeah, it's an immense challenge. The network effects are extremely strong, and these companies have been built up over decades, and the networks have been built up over decades. It's very powerful that you can tap your Apple Pay or you can tap your Google Pay almost anywhere in the world, and it'll just work. But you're right; it's very surprising, and what people don't really understand is that when you do tap your Apple or Google Pay at the supermarket or the coffee shop, the money doesn't move to the merchant instantly, and particularly if it's cross-border, there's this whole web of processes where it actually takes days for the money to get to the merchant, and it costs quite a lot of high fees. And so Ethereum blockchains like Ethereum present a very interesting solution, a very compelling solution to the problem, but they do have challenges around scalability and privacy, cost of transactions, and really that's what we look to solve with the infrastructure. That's what we're looking to solve for, particularly to bring that next wave of adoption. The way that we do that is by building a layer 2 network on top of Ethereum that gives that allows for transactions with the assurances of privacy, high speed, and low cost.
So you're talking to somebody who got scammed last week and lost. It wasn't a great deal, but it was still enough to be annoyed. And I figure I'm kind of pretty kind of tuned in. I think about my mum trying to navigate a MetaMask wallet and send money rather than using a Revolut app. And I struggle to see, kind of how from a user experience, you're going to get that billion extra users into it. What is it that Canvas is doing from a usability perspective to onboard that next billion users?
Sure. So we're really focused on building very simple SDKs and APIs that those financial institutions like Revolut, for example, like you gave, that they could integrate us very easily and without having any knowledge around solidity development or blockchain specific domain languages, they can very easily change the rails that they're using to transfer value, to trade assets, and to invest and integrate into their workflows. And so that's where we see that we can solve that usability issue. It's as you said before, there's a huge network effect and people are probably pretty happy with the apps that they're using and they don't want to change. And so what we focus on is saying, okay, you can remain where you are, and underneath the hood, the rails that are being used are moving over to blockchain. I think that's really going to be the change over the coming years. That from an outside perspective, from a consumer perspective, you might still be using the same apps. You probably still will be using the same apps, but you'll see an increase in speed. You'll hopefully see a reduction in costs and just better services that are otherwise not possible today. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, David, because I think certainly from where I sit and my kind of involvement in fintech, when I look across my client base, I would say that probably most of the innovation happens in the pipes and the plumbing and the infrastructure versus the kind of front end and the customer experience and the B2C side. So it's interesting to hear that that same kind of phenomenon now is starting to happen within Web3 and blockchain, where I think it's very much the talk has been on CX and onboarding users, where that's not really a problem for a bank. They're pretty slick now, these kind of in-app experiences of being onboarded and being able to use stuff. Even the big four banks here in Oz, I think, do a really good job from a customer perspective with their apps.
And they've invested a lot, and they've got very smart UI UX people, and they've got great designers and developers working for them. And really, it's underneath the hood that you can get these benefits.
The timing of this is cool, and that last week you announced or it was announced by the RBA that they, I think, have 14 pilots around different use cases for a CBDC. You were one of those use cases. Could you tell us a little bit about that, David?
Sure. So this is a very exciting project, and we've been working closely with the RBA and DFCRC for a number of months now. So the background is that the RBA and in conjunction with the DFCRC are launching a pilot to investigate the benefits of issuing a central bank digital currency, or essentially a digital dollar. If you think about the Australian dollar now, it's issuing an equivalent. 1 Australian dollar equals 1 EAUD. So it's the same dollar, just in a different format. And so the way that it's being approached, it's very much a collaborative effort between government and corporates invited various participants to submit use cases, and they received, I think, around 140 applications. And through a selective process of working with the use case providers, they selected 14, and we were one of those 14. And our proposed use case is to demonstrate tokenized FX trading and instant settlement between AUD and USD, so using digital currencies in place of fiat currencies, which has enormous benefits over traditional platforms and creates a 24/7, 365 market. So that's very exciting. So it's very much a pilot, and it's an investigation to see what's possible. So they haven't made a decision about if a CBDC will be issued in the future, but it's nonetheless very exciting to see that there's leadership from Australia, that we're one of the first in the world to be considering and really investigating this, because it is part of a digital economy in the future.
And I noticed as well, I think you're one of only 2 startups, I think, to be amongst those 14. The rest are pretty significant financial institutions, major banks.
Yes, that's right.
Global fintech. So that's that's a fairly kind of significant vote of confidence in the Canvas team and what you're building. How did that come about, and kind of what kind of competition were you up against to be the ones who got kind of the tick in the end?
Sure. So as soon as we started reading in the media and reading online that this project was coming up, we were very interested to participate and put our hat in the ring. And so we made an online application like everyone else, and we started engaging with the DFCRC and having ongoing discussions with them to put forward our use case and to ensure that it was regulatory compliant. And it's all of the use cases are subject to regulatory approval by both AUSTRAC and ASIC. And so the RBA really wanted to make sure that everything that's being done, even though it's a pilot, is legal and within a regulatory framework. And so we've had to work through that process over the last few months to get to that point where we're on the selected use case providers, and it's going to go through now to the last stage of regulatory approval with all the other use cases.
So, David, it very much reminds me where the technology is at and where blockchain is at here in Oz, that it's very reminiscent to kind of the path that fintech's been on. And I remember 2015, 2016, 2017, the regulators were every day meeting with some 23-year-old dude with not a great deal of experience, saying they were going to Uberize banking and they were going to disrupt it and do all this stuff, and kind of really didn't have any concept of regulation and what it took to get a digital bank license. Now, I'm pretty certain that the regulators have been facing the same kind of challenges in the blockchain space, where there's kind of these wild and crazy libertarians and kind of people who got these really wild use cases for the technology, and then there's businesses like yourself and founders like yourself who really kind of recognize the need for regulation and the kind of role that regulators play. How have you gone about the path of getting that credibility with regulators and kind of giving them confidence that, hey, like this is a technology that's worth investing in?
So we believe regulation is a net positive for the space, and so we're happy to engage with the regulators, give feedback, and provide our insight and show that this is not essentially a net replacement for finance, and we're not going to destroy banks and get rid of them or anything like that. But really, we should inform and provide guidance on this new technology and what are its applications and what are the benefits and how it can be operated and integrated as part of the legal framework that governs finance, which is very important for everyone and actually for the functioning of society, and is really the antithesis of everything that we've seen over the last couple of years. So we're happy to engage, provide insight, and work with regulators both here in Australia, such as participating in the Treasury token mapping exercise and speaking with the senators, and with ASIC and Austrac about how the space and our company operates, and then on a global basis as well. I previously lived in Singapore for 5 years, and they've got a very advanced stance and on digital assets and a framework for digital assets. Europe is now passing laws as well. So I think this is going to continue, and over the next few years, you'll see more regulation, more certainty come in, and that's a net positive. And then you can have companies that can come in with regulatory certainty about how to grow the business and provide services to both in both a B2B sense and in a B2C sense.
Yeah. So Canvas isn't your first startup. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. So Canvas is essentially the continuation of a 20-year journey together with my brother, and really a longer journey with my family. We're all entrepreneurial. My grandparents came out from Europe after World War II and plied their trade in clothing manufacturing, which my parents did as well. And so we've always grown up in an entrepreneurial environment. My sister and her husband run their own business as well. And so my brother started one of Australia's first fintech companies called Pure Commerce in the early days of the internet. And I joined straight out of school as a lowly IT engineer with a lot more hair and a fro, and going around. And in that time, there was no Amazon Web Services, there was no Google Cloud, and the seed funding that we received in the early days was really spent on physical equipment and setting up
servers,
physical data centers. And so I flew all around the world setting up those data centers, and we worked together very much closely and together with his wife, Amanda, growing that business internationally. And so we started in Australia providing in services to NAB and Tyro, then expanded into New Zealand with BNZ, and then really wanted to grow globally, and so decided we could do that most effectively from Singapore. And so once we moved to Singapore, we started working with banks throughout Asia, such as Citibank, and then moving into Europe. And when we sold the company in 2013, we were providing services to over 30 banks around the world and handling billions of dollars a year in payments. And so that was a really fantastic journey, from starting in grandmother's garage to exiting to a NASDAQ listed company, and then going through the integration process, and then deciding to move on to the next big thing, and what's our next 20-year venture. And that's where I started seeing blockchain, and I said to my brother, there's something here. This is going to, coming from a payments background, there's never been something that could potentially challenge what Visa does. And that's what Bitcoin was in the early days. And so once I saw that and started going down the rabbit hole, I said, we can do it all over again, and let's get into it.
So how did you get Canvas off the ground, David?
So after we finished up at Pure Commerce, we took some time to think about what were the next big technology trends that were worthy of the next 10, 20 years of our life. And given our heritage in payments and finance, blockchain was a very natural fit. And so I spent that time doing a very deep dive on the technology, started mining Ethereum very early on, started in buying Bitcoin and really using Bitcoin. And so the first time that you send a digital currency, like you send Bitcoin from one person to another, it's like a light globe moment. It's a light bulb moment. Until you've experienced it viscerally, you don't. It's quite esoteric. And so once we started showing that to each other and really deep diving on it, that's where we started building the next venture, and really just starting from a blank piece of paper. And that's very, very hard to do. Yeah. And it's
can I just ask on that? Was there kind of a paradigm shift for you when you did that, to go, actually, I can send like any amount of this and the fee isn't going to change, and I'm not getting charged a percentage. So if I send $1 million of Bitcoin, I'm not getting charged, 1.5%, and therefore, $150,000 or $15,000 to send this. Was that kind of like a paradigm shift for you, just to kind of completely, move out of, the challenges that you'd experienced previously with payments?
It seemed obvious to me. And so that over time, that not necessarily Bitcoin as a payment method, but the underlying blockchain, and saying this tech is extremely powerful, and it's going to evolve over time, as all technology does. And that's what really got me excited. I'm a geek, computer science background. I really love playing with tech, and I've done that all the way growing up. And really, it thrills and excites me to play with new technology. And this was like the shiny new thing, and spending a lot of time with it and seeing when you mine Ethereum and you become a participant in the network, having seen and been a part of credit card networks like Visa, MasterCard, and Amex and what they do, and then think that exact same network is being operated by individuals and anyone can be a part of it. That's really, really powerful in my mind.
Yeah. And that kind of, the origins of where you came from, having to set up your own servers and data centers, did that then make it kind of quite easy for you to kind of grasp, setting up Ethereum nodes and setting up rigs and kind of that whole concept as well?
Yeah, so I bought a whole bunch of graphics cards and I bought a motherboard and all the components, and then I started putting it together as I did when I was 12, 13 years old. And I actually called my young nephew over and I said, "Here, come do what I was doing when I was a kid." And he looked at it all and he's like, "What is all this?" Like, he had no idea. He didn't know he'd never seen what the inside of a computer looks like because he's only seen an iPad or an iPhone. Yeah. So that was a pretty cool bonding experience as well with my young nephew at the time. I've got photos of him here in the office putting together an Ethereum rig. Obviously, it's on the shelf now as an antique, given that we've now moved to proof of stake. Yeah. But it felt like a pretty retro throwback. It made me feel a little bit, showed my age as well, of plugging into computers together.
I think that's one of the really cool things, all right, about the technology is it is almost going back to, I grew up in the 80s. Yeah, and they're kind of sitting there, right? I remember Christmas Day with the ZX81. My fingers literally bled typing in code on a keyboard to, for a day to watch a ball bounce up and down on the screen, and you're absolutely mesmerized, right? But I think looking at my fingers and the amount of effort was the end of my programming days. But it's, I think what's really kind of cool about the technology is how it does actually get people to think about the engineering and the mechanics of how it actually works, right? Because as you say, it's like my kids' money, there's no concept to it, right? It's like they don't physically handle cash anymore. They've got accounts and they just kind of tap, and it's like, and now even for them, the distinction between actually, real dollars and virtual dollars and in-game currencies and stuff like that, it's kind of, it's very difficult to as a parent be able to give them a concept of money and value when everything's invisible.
Yeah, and it's they're digital natives, and to them it's no different. And so if they get digital currency, if it's no matter what form it is, if it's in game or if it's in their wallet, like that's just what they know. And same with digital collectibles, the things that they buy in game or are just as real to them as the physical items that they buy in the shop, and just as meaningful to them. So that's really, and that's a cultural shift and a generational shift that I believe that they'll, in the same way as like we were quite quick to pick up computers, and I liked playing video games growing up. And I think that generational shift of just that it's instant and that they grasp digital just from day dot, and it's just a native part of them is part of what is this big movement, and where is this space going over time. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier, entrepreneurship is in your DNA. It's in your brother's DNA. But you've also got, you coming from an engineering background, kind of like the perfect, mix and ingredients of being able to bootstrap a business and kind of get something off the ground with, minimal capital, minimal need to go out to investors and seek outside capital as well. How have you kind of utilized your skills and experience and, natural talents amongst each other to grow the business, and where are you at now?
Mm. So we make a really good team. We're both very interested in technology, and Daniel is very focused on business and finance as well. And so we've worked together side by side, interchangeably, for over 20 years. And even to the point where when we lived in Singapore together, we'd go to Changi Airport and we'd have one meeting in Korea, one meeting in the Philippines, and we could almost just pick a card and say who's going to which one, and it wouldn't matter. It was interchangeable. And so we've worked really well in that, with that experience, with the global network of banks, partners, and investors that we've provided significant returns to in the past. And so what that means is that we're able to be quite self-sufficient. And so we've done all of our own funding. We've taken no outside capital. And so essentially we've done our own seed and venture funding. And we've backed ourselves to really show that we are committed to this business. We've invested significant time and capital into the business to get it to this point. And we really want to show that this is an actual business, that it's able to operate a business that has revenue and generates eventually profits to provide returns to investors. Like, this is just the fundamentals of having a business. And I think a lot of that has been lost in Web3 to some extent. Of course, there's a reversion to the mean now.
Societal, right? It's like I'm seeing this in my business, David, that over this last 12, 13 years, the whole talent pool, there are very few who've actually had experience of just running a P&L, where you keep costs down and you're able to grow revenue, because of the mentality of, kind of growth at all costs, right? And it's kind of, this one day it'll be worth gazillions, and you've got to actually turn a profit, right? And the kind of way in which we've valued organizations, and I can understand some of the, reasoning behind it, but I think that it's shifted now and we're in a very different place.
And we've never subscribed to it. Like, if you look at, say, Pure Commerce, we got seed funded in the depths of the dot-com bubble crash. It was late 2000, and we grew organically all the way through to exit. So it wasn't a straight line. There was a lot of challenges. You have to work really hard to manage expenses, to grow revenue, and to really focus on business fundamentals. And that's the same kind of rigor that we bring to Canvas and just in general. And it's hard. It's very hard.
It is. What, on that note, what has been the biggest challenge so far at Canvas?
So I think the biggest challenge there's a couple. It's really important to shut down the noise that's happening in the space. So crypto Twitter and things that are happening outside, and just saying, let's just focus on building, and let's focus on building a sustainable business.
So instead of tweeting about building, you're actually building.
Let's focus on building. That's right.
Honestly, David, I'm kind of bemused as to how these people find the time to build something when they're constantly on Twitter talking about building something.
So I think there's a lot, there's a lot to be said for Twitter about sharing and learning and discovering, and there's a lot of alpha leak and things that you can learn there. But to get too deep in the back and forth can really really distract you from what's really important, which is building the business. And I think the other challenge is as well just the appreciation, the space. It takes time to build and to work with these organizations that have decades of systems built up, and it's not going to be like a consumer just downloading a new app and moving from one to another. So it's going to take time, and it's going to take capital and resources and focus and a lot of energy and stamina to make it through this process, and see that with all of the challenges, with getting up every day and finding another fire that you have to put out and getting hit in the face repeatedly, but keep going back for more, and then coming in day after day and focusing on the end goal.
And around talent, what kind of challenges have you faced there?
So, as you mentioned before, over the last couple of years, the cost of talent has gone up significantly, and it was pretty competitive to attract talent, particularly in the Web3 space, given that you had companies that were paying crazy packages. I think that's obviously dropping off now. But really what we've been focused on is getting the right talent, no matter where they are. I think the positive of remote working, and we're very much pro remote working, we're happy to find the talent no matter where in the world they are. And it really, that opens us up to far more than just the people that are within a half hour or 1 hour commute. So we have developers and staff that work with us all around the world. We work asynchronously on Slack and on Jira and on collaboration tools. And we really focus on remaining accountable to deadline and deliverables and the overall mission and goals of the business. And everyone's bought in on that. And in that way, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. I was going to ask that question actually, because I think one of the biggest challenges that I've seen over this last few years is, as we've shifted to this kind of remote or work from home, and there's been a big debate around productivity. And I think for most businesses, it's not been as productive as having people in the office. And, I think there's a couple of reasons why I believe that to be the case. Is one, you've probably hired the wrong people, as in, they don't have the right mindset, kind of discipline, behavior set, and capability to be able to work in isolation and deliver. Like you said, right? You've got to deliver. And it's, I've worked for myself for 7 years, right? And the discipline that I have to wake up in the morning and get on with it, when I can easily just turn around to myself and say, hey, you're the boss. It's kind of go and spend the day at the beach. And then I guess the other side is, from a leadership perspective, is we haven't groomed leaders to actually manage and get performance from remote teams. What is it that you've been able to do from that leadership perspective that's ensured that the teams are delivering and you can have this distributed workforce working asynchronously and delivering on kind of timelines and delivering projects?
So we've been doing this. We've been doing the remote work thing and collaboration for many years. Like before it was a thing. Even when I remember when Skype first came out, we started using it immediately, and we started putting video cameras above LCD screens in our boardrooms and started speaking and having video conferences between our offices in Sydney and Singapore. And so you ask, what is it? This kind of face-to-face. I think video is very powerful. It's very easy if you don't have the video on to just kind of zone out and do other things on the keyboard. So we speak
Pull faces at the boss and
and just pipe in when it's your turn to speak. So I have regular conversations with all of my team members on a very regular basis, which at a minimum it's a Slack message on a daily basis, and it tends to be we have daily huddles and stand-ups and regular calls and things that are in the diary, and just making sure that everyone is on the same page. People know what's the big picture. And really coming back to your point earlier about what are the people, we want people on the team that think like owners, not think that they're just here to do a job. They want to be bought into the company, bought into the mission, the long-term mission of the company, and that they are working towards something and that they are part owners of the business. And so that really creates a big distinction from having someone that's just executing tasks that are on the backlog, someone that's really bought into the mission of the business.
Yeah, I've actually been really fascinated just watching my kids. So my son, who's 10, he and my daughter, who's just a year and a bit older than him, both signed up for debating. So out of 250 kids that were kind of eligible, only 14 decided that they were going to enter the debating class. 2 of those 14 were my kids. So tells you a lot about what, how my wife and I might argue a lot. But what's really interesting has been to see how gaming, and particularly my son, who kind of is gaming a lot and on his headset the whole time, has developed these leadership and influence and skills. And being able to, just through playing Fortnite with his mates and being able to settle arguments and kind of get everybody to kind of work in unison. And I was thinking, wow, it's like maybe, the kind of gaming generation are perfectly suited to remote work and working from home, because they're kind of used to just trying to get an outcome and a result over a headset, right? And maybe there's a little kind of video screen in the corner.
Yeah, I think so too. It's they're just so, again, digitally native and just used to, the idle chatter the back and forward, the incidental chatter. And yes, between my daughters and their cousins, they have an open line of communication. They're always on FaceTime and iMessage, and they do entrepreneurial ventures together. They go and run a lemonade stand. And the first time that they ran the lemonade stand, people kept saying, "Oh, sorry, but I don't have cash." And so we went out and got them a Square reader. And so now they take Apple and Google Pay. And so now when people say I don't have cash, it's okay, we've got Apple Pay. Yeah. And then the sale is done. And so really teaching them and those entrepreneurial skills and how to run a business and and settle disputes, about how to divide up the money and how to put how much sugar in the limit and what should the recipe be.
Fantastic. Now, look, every founder, every business owner goes through dark moments and kind of times where you really question what you're doing and why have you put yourself in this situation. When you kind of hit those moments, where do you go for inspiration? The kind of hacks that you have around routine, or the people that you go to talk to. What's your kind of way to get around that?
So I'm very fortunate, and together with my brother, we've been here before. We've been through cycles before. We've been through the dot-com crash. We've been through 2008. We've gone through extreme challenges in the business, literally near-death experiences that you've been on the floor and you think that it's all over, but you just have to get up, dust your jacket off, and keep pushing on. And that's really powerful when you say that you've at least got that you can draw comparisons to those things that have happened before. So that provides a lot of at least a good place to go to. Also thinking that the space is that this is happening in context, and that it's happening to a lot of people, not just us. So it's happening in context of a macro environment. I personally do yoga and bicycling, and I enjoy walking on the beach and getting out in nature and swimming at Bondi. I find that's very important to actually leave my phone at home and just disconnect for that half hour, 40 minutes, just to get away from all notifications, all screen time, just wherever I can. And that takes a lot of energy in and of itself to overcome that inertia as well. But it's really important. And lastly, adding to that as well, looking at other and listening to other founder stories, I feel is extremely powerful. Like when you listen to other founders that have gone through similar experiences, like huge companies that of, name brands that we know of, that they've gone through extreme adversity and there was no way that they could have made it, but they still became the success that we know. When you listen to the likes of, say, Brian Chesky at Airbnb and what they went through in the first few years of building the business, and when you look at, say, the Spotify story, and there's countless other stories in tech where it wasn't a straight line at all. And when you listen to those stories and you say, hey, that's exactly where we are now, I find that's very, very powerful. And that gives you that little spark that maybe you can just, pick yourself up and keep going again. But it's definitely part of the entrepreneurial journey, and it takes a lot of power to overcome and get out of those dark times. Yeah.
And do you just appear on podcasts, or do you listen to them as well?
I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I've got a thing for audiobooks as well.
Yeah. What are your kind of top podcasts that you go to?
I love the Fintech Chatter and Blockchain Chatter podcast. That's a really good one.
Thanks for that. Yeah. You're the one.
And the Empire podcast, Bankless, these are really good examples in Web3. A16Z crypto podcast as well. I really enjoy the Masters of Scale with Reid Hoffman as well. Yeah. There's just fantastic fly on the wall insights about crazy stories that you would never hear from inside these hallowed rooms of venture capital and business. I just think is unbelievable to listen to.
I actually believe that we're almost kind of at a point in society where it's a bit like the first Matrix movie, where we now, and I know we talk about data a lot, but there's so much information. Right, we've got access to information and insights that we've never had before, and not rubbish, like people trying to sell you something. I mean, stuff like this. And just if I look at, kind of the humble, my humble little podcast and the impact that it has on people, where I get new founders saying, hey, I've listened to your podcast for the last 2 years and I've kind of, learned so much about how to launch and run a fintech in Australia. Whereas previously all the stuff I was hearing was from the UK or the US, where it's a different market. It's not kind of quite right, for this market. And so, you being on the show kind of adds to that, right? And every time I bump into someone, or every day I'll get a message saying, hey, love the podcast, this episode, this thing, or, somebody's been a guest will say, hey, somebody reached out to me and we've just hired them. Yeah, thanks very much, right? So it's kind of, I think they're a really powerful medium, not only for sharing information, but I think, if if you're in a spot where you haven't got access to mentors and you can't get the best advice, you actually can by listening to the right podcasts, I feel.
Absolutely. So how else could you hear stories from inside the negotiation rooms of a venture capital firm like Andreessen Horowitz or Sequoia, or name any of a major, or any really major venture capital firm? Or you can go and sit in a computer science class at Cambridge or any of the Ivy League universities and hear about computer science or venture capital or private equity. It's just unbelievable, to your point of saying all of the information is available, very high quality information as well, not rubbish. And you can use that to integrate into your life and into your professional life and into your personal life, and hear these stories that you wouldn't otherwise get. And it's also sometimes a bit less polished and it's a bit more raw. It's really, it's the personal story.
That's what I find, right? It's like people will say to me, how do you get your guests to open up? So, well, I don't. I just, let them talk. And I think people are prepared to share, and hate using that word, be vulnerable. But I think they recognize that what's really important, and I find this every time I have a conversation with a CEO, is, and you made this point earlier, they think that it's just them. And then they, read Twitter, they go on LinkedIn and they see their competitors, and there's PR pieces out there about how they're flying. And I'm having the very same conversation with the CEO of the business that's purportedly flying, the guy who's thinking we're about to go bust. And they're both feeling exactly the same way, right? And when you're able to say, hey, look, none of us are, or even if we are doing well, we're just in a good moment right now, and we know that we're going to be kind of where you are at some point in the future, it gives people that, not just comfort, but the kind of will to go, okay, this is just a moment. I've got to push on. I know there's a prize at the end of this if I can keep pushing through this. Which, when you think, right, like when you were 2000 with your first startup, there was none of this, right? Like, I mean, startups weren't even really kind of a thing, right? I mean, we had the .com boom, but after that, it was like startup was a dirty word, right? And it was for quite a long time.
That's right. And, this is the life we chose.
Yeah.
And it's this thing we've got and this life we chose. So it's very hard. And you're right. From 2000 to 2004, it was a wasteland. There was no e-commerce didn't really boom until 2004. So I think 4 very hard years in the wilderness where you don't have any of the communication channels that you do now. It's very much, really early days of the internet, long before this explosion of information that's freely available. So I think you're right. It's a very important part, and your work's great. And I think it takes a lot of courage and a lot of, I'd say, willpower to continue on and be regular with the podcast and really be getting good guests and producing high quality content.
Yeah, look, and that's, I think it is obviously a challenge, right? Is to kind of maintain the content and the guests. And I think it's the thing I'm probably proudest of, is that, every show is, produced with a lot of love and intent and, kind of thought around how does this actually help my network, and how does this help the ecosystem here in Oz. We're coming to a wrap up, David, but before we do, is there a region country at the moment that's got you really excited around blockchain and Web3?
I think this is a global opportunity. And so in the same way as e-commerce and the internet was a global opportunity, this movement towards digital currencies, CBDCs, tokenized assets is going to happen on a global basis, given that finance is global. And so we think from day one, always, to be a global business. We were at Pure Commerce, and so are we at Canvas as well. And so we really focus on solving these challenges on a global basis and serving the needs of various different financial institutions and governments and corporates around the world as they move into this digital asset space. So we're happy to expand globally and move to where we need to be in order to grow the business and in order to expand the reach of the space.
Brilliant. And on that note, if there's anybody listening who is interested in the Canvas solution, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Sure. So you can check out our website. It's canvas.co. On the website, there's a registration page where you can contact us. There's also a great content section of the website, which will link to all of our Medium posts and YouTube videos and different content pieces that can help you learn a bit more about who we are and what we do and what we believe as well.
Yeah. We also get amazing talent listening to this podcast. I'm sure some of them would be pretty excited by what you're building. And one of the things that really, is a common denominator with the top talent is they all want to leave behind some form of legacy and build something they can be proud of. If they're listening and they're interested in potential careers at Canvas, what's the best way for them to find out more?
So feel free to reach out, and we're happy to always look at new talent and understand what your background is and what you're doing in the space. It's always good to have discussions with new people that are moving either from Web 2 or just moving from wherever they are into the space.
Brilliant. Well, David, it's been fantastic to chat with you. Really excited about what you're building. It's kind of testament again to Australia punching above their weight when it comes to blockchain and fintech innovation. And yeah, it's I was super excited when I came from Singapore. I think they made it really clear that institution and supporting institutions is the way forward. And to see what you're building here in Oz is, very, very exciting.
Thank you. I also felt energized after coming back from Token 2049 and seeing such a huge turnout and seeing that this is there's a real movement and it's going to happen. It's going to take time, but it is going to happen if you have the patience and the stamina and the willpower to get through it.
Well, thanks for listening, folks. You can connect with me as always, Dexter Cousins on LinkedIn and Twitter. If you're coming back, thanks so much for your support. And if you're new to the show, make sure to follow us and leave a review. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and leave us a comment. Until the next episode, stay safe. Fintech Chatter is presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in fintech executive search. We'll help you find world-class fintech leadership talent to build world-class fintech ventures. And you can find out more at tier1people.com.